No screaming while the bus is in motion!
What's happening, my fellow ghouls and ghoulettes? Welcome to a brand new episode of Cosplay. Chris, and today I'm going to be showing you guys the process of molding, casting, and painting my 1:1 scale bust of Freddy Krueger from Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. Now, first and foremost, a massive thank you to the extremely talented Sean Dabbs who designed the 3D file. I had a scan of Robert Englund's live cast. Sean and I have collaborated before on the Part 1 bust. We are now finishing off the Part 6 bust because, quite frankly, Freddy's Dead holds a near and dear place in my heart. I've compared it to watching The Room and Samurai Cop. It is an experience in the bad film department, and I know a lot of people have a soft spot for it, and a lot of people have a massive hate for it, which is totally fair and totally understandable because it is a batshit crazy film when you compare it to the first Elm Street. Literally, both Fred Krueger and Freddy Krueger are chalk and cheese when it comes to the first Elm Street and the sixth Elm Street. And as you guys saw in the unboxing video of my original 3D print of the Part 6 bust from FactFox, I had to give it a quick coat of primer so you guys could see all the details. I've gone ahead and then added 2 coats of primer filler just to fill in a few print lines that were hovering around the shoulder area. I've gone ahead and mounted him down on a board so we can easily mold this thing. Now we're going to be doing a silicone mold with a 2-part fiberglass shell mode. Now, I didn't get footage of me doing the fiberglassing of the 2-piece shell, and that's because fiberglassing is very involved and it's one of those things where once you start, you can't stop, and it gets too much when I have the camera there and you got to stop and start and your hands are covered in the gel and there's fiberglass everywhere. But you guys have seen me do that in the past with the Robert Pattinson face shell as well as the Robert Englund live cast from a couple of years ago. So if you are curious about that, I will link those videos in the video description. It's the exact same process. Now, for the resin, I'm going to be using Supercast from Barnes, and I'm also going to be adding a flesh tint in there for the base color that we're going to be working with. So with that being said, let's get to it.
Oh, no screaming while the shitty commentary's in motion!
So first up, I'm going to start with molding the teeth, and this is pretty much the exact same method I used when I was molding the Nightmare Joker teeth, but I had to sand them flat because they were like curvatures and stuff, but I was just gluing them down, as you can see right here, just to some spare cardboard, and then grabbing some foam core. So we've got our walls to make our block mold. Again, I just call this an expensive ice cube tray, ghouls and ghoulettes. So I'm just going to start mixing up my Pinkysil from Barnes. Mix ratio is 100 to 100 and pour that baby in. And what I found is by pouring it high, it gets rid of the air bubbles on the way down. And I just let that sit for about a good 2 hours, even, you know, putting it in the sun, just letting it kick a little bit quicker and just taking my time just so no pieces of the silicone rip off on the actual prints themselves. Now, when it came time to casting the teeth, I'm going to be using the exact same stuff I'm going to be using on Freddy himself, and that is Supercast, like Pinkysil. Mix ratio is 100 to 100, and I probably just let this sit for about an hour. It was nice and humid that day, so that really helped the resin kick off. And we've got some great castings here. Little bit of air bubbles you can see right there at that front tooth, but you can just easily file that away. And if anything, that kind of helps with the rot. Now I'm just grabbing a hot pink pearl from Model Masters, and that is going to help with coloring the gums, even though you are not going to see the gums at all. It's just good practice, and it just helps to have that there. Now, when it came to staining the teeth, we're just using some good old-fashioned brown shoe polish and also some black shoe polish, and like just that simple, and just wiping away the excess, and they can just look so decayed, so rotted, and you can go to different levels of how rotted you want the teeth to be. So Robert's teeth in Freddy's Dead aren't as rotten as they were in the previous films, but they're still pretty gnarly. Now, when it came to molding Freddy himself, pretty much the same method, but we're just going to be brushing the silicone on. Now, I also had Thicksil, which is a silicone thickener, so I thickened it up on a couple of layers. As you can see right there, that was a thickened up layer. So overall, I did about 8 or 9 brush coats of Pinkysil, and as always, the first 2 are vital to get all that detail. Now, these are just my keys. I'm setting my keys up so it's going to slot into the mold and hold into the mold nicely. And what I use majority for the keys were these little plastic containers, these little plastic vials, pouring some silicone in, letting it set, and then pulling them out, and those are my keys. So I got a silicone adhesive. This is Silpoxy from Smooth On. I've had this stuff lying around for ages. It is so handy. It's great for fixing tears and stuff like that, but also for gluing these keys down. And what this does because I'm going to be slitting the mold at the back, these keys are going to help everything stay in place at the back of the fiberglass mold. Now, before the fiberglassing itself, I had to make a dividing wall just with some water-based clay and sealing it up with some duct tape. I know it's very kind of cheap and nasty, but this way no water comes through and affects the curing of the fiberglass. Now, like I mentioned, I didn't get footage of me fiberglassing, but you guys have seen that before. It just gets very full on and very busy and very messy, especially it's hard when there's a camera around. And it's always very touch and go when you're cracking it open. It takes a lot of time to kind of break that seal, but once you do, it's so good. It's so great. Like, it's so satisfying when it all just cracks off. Now I'm just grabbing a blade there and slitting the seam down the back. They're trying to be as careful as I can. And again, like cracking the mold off, the mother mold, you've just got to do it in stages. And I was very happy overall with how that turned out. Now, just like with the teeth, time to grab some more Supercast, but this time with some flesh tint, and that is going to help with our paint work. So it's going to be a nice little blank canvas. Now, I only need a little bit because this tint goes a long way, and if you get it on your skin, it goes a long way too. It stays there for ages. Now, overall, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. This was 5 good slush coats, making sure as it's kicking, just to really cake it up, just to build up that thickness and the structure, especially on the shoulders. You don't want it flimsy on the shoulders at all, I've found whilst doing these Freddy busts. But it was pretty quick in terms of kicking because it was a hot day, but very happy with how it turned out and very happy with how that flesh tint turned out. So now it's time to crack him out of the mold. We're going to undo all of our screws and then crack the shell mold off. And again, when you're doing your first pull from the mold, you want to be as careful as you can when removing the silicone portion of the mold, because you got to keep in mind things can split. Silicone can definitely split. So I try and hold my hand on the top as you see right there so the seam doesn't split anymore. But it was a great pull. It was a great first casting. Very happy with how the flesh tone turned out. So I'm just going to grab my Ryobi rotary tool, and we're going to gut out the mouth and the eyes, and then go in with my little hobby file kit and just file them smooth and clean them up and just make sure the eyes slot in perfectly okay. But in terms of doing a base coat, it was very touch and go and kind of a bit of trial and error. Like, the makeup is very simple, but in this instance, I grabbed some hot pink pearl and just watered it down with a few kind of drops of water I had on my brush there, my disposable brush. And this is going to act as our base coat and essentially just dabbing it all over the sculpt, but not dabbing it on where there would be no makeup on the shoulders, because I want it to look like Robert's got the makeup on, like the makeup just stops and then it's his normal skin color. So with hot pink pearl, because it's like an acrylic, you have to keep working with it until it starts to dry. And then I tap away the excess, so it's got that kind of skin blotchiness to it. Now, this is a primer I had lying around, a flesh colored primer, and now we're going to dry brush the details on, and that kind of brings back all the beautiful details, and then it complements the hot pink pearl, and that way you've got your fleshy pinks and whatnot that are very reminiscent of the Freddy's Dead makeup. So once this was done, it gives me a clear idea of how I'm going to go in and detail the burns, because the last step with this is pretty much the detailing of the burns. So I'm going to be using oil colors for that. I'm just going to grab a burnt umber, and this is going to be the first base layer. So this is going to be around the edges of like the bottom edges of the burns. So studying the Freddy's Dead makeup, a lot of detail happens at the bottom of the burns and then tapers out into kind of the flesh pinky color. Again, it's a very dull makeup, but obviously you want to try and replicate it as best as possible. And it was quite cathartic and very fun to do this. I love doing this, and also not just necessarily the burns, but going in on the temples there, as you can see right there, even around some portions of the eyes, just to add a bit of darkness, I guess you could say. And I thought it worked great. Now, I then also purchased a blue oil color, because he's got 2 temple veins on either side, or 1 on either side, I should say. And it's very subtle. In the film, they're quite stark, but I wanted them a lot more subtle and a bit more natural looking here. And that was just with a little disposable brush, and also wiping my finger just to kind of blend it in, just so it's not too harsh against the rest of the color palette. Now, these eyes I actually got off eBay. These are doll's eyes, and I set them in place with blue tack to hold them in place, just to make sure they line up, and then I just go in with some cheap and nasty super glue, and that's easy done. Now, I did glue the teeth together, but I'm going to grab some EVA foam, like I said, like how I did Nightmare Joker, because you need a buffer, you need something between the teeth and the sculpt, because there's not enough room and surface area to grab on to either surface, so you need that EVA foam there for it to grab onto and kick and just hold it in place. So either end, or should I say top and bottom of the teeth, just some EVA foam. The thickness wise, I think this is about 3 or 4 mil in terms of thickness of the EVA foam. And again, it just helps setting the teeth in place a lot more easier. How horrifying is that image right there? That's nightmare fuel. So I hover it around the lips until I've lined it up properly and I'm happy with it, and then just push it against the back of his lips, and there you go, just simple as that. Now I'm just going to grab a red. This is kind of like a burgundy-ish red oil color, and this is the final step with the burns. This is what really brings out the burns and the highlights of the burns, and really solidifies this as a Freddy's Dead makeup, not Dream Child. And as you can see right there already, just those highlights at the tops and the bottoms of the burns, and kind of fading out into the natural flesh tones. That's what I was going for, and I was very happy with the end result, Ghouls and Ghoulettes. And with that being said, we're ready for the final reveal.
And there we have it, Ghouls and Ghoulettes. I'm absolutely and utterly thrilled with how he's turned out. Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare in 1:1 scale bust glory, with my sweater from Knitwise, the Part 6 sweater that I showed you guys on the initial announcement video. I'm very happy with how the paintwork turned out. Keeping in mind, like I said, the Part 6 makeup in terms of the paintwork and the color scheme, it's very bare bones. Like, it's very boring to look at, very matted in certain parts. So overall, pretty happy with how it turned out. The subtle vein work worked out really well. So the next step is actually going to be making the full display bust. So if you guys caught my live stream last week, I did say that I'm opting to do kind of a wall mount bust. I do want more of the torso and also a floating arm with the glove. I think that's just going to be a lot of fun. So thanks very much for watching, guys. Of course, more horror related content to come. We are in the lead up to Halloween, ends in a couple of weeks time. I'm very excited about that, and also very nervous at the same time. I just want this film to do really well and just cap off the Laurie Strode set of films in a really classy way. But with that being said, wherever you are in the world, please have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly, and until next time, Ghouls and Ghoulettes, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.